who therefore created God?
Mm-hmm. Well, to answer that question again, God is, by definition, a self-existent, timeless, necessary being. So if there is a God, yes, if there is a God, we'll talk about possibilities. If there is a God, there cannot be a cause of such an entity, any more than there can be a cause of the number 7 or the property of being blue. Things that begin to exist, that come into being, have causes. But something that's eternal and necessary.
So God was always there, and at some point along the line, although there was no time then, so clearly I can't say at some point in time.
Which very
makes
good. That's right.
Which makes it mildly more difficult to pursue this, but nonetheless.
But that's right. Yep.
At some point, God decided that he'd create this whole thing.
Rather, I would say not that he decided, but at some point he did create the whole thing.
Well, presumably.
It's on the table.
But he's saying
evidence for what?
Evidence for a beginning of the universe.
Yes.
Well, we know that. Nobody disputes
all right, well, that's what I'm offering in this first argument, is the evidence.
But because there's a beginning doesn't imply a God.
It does if the first premise is true, that whatever begins to exist has a cause. It logically follows.
Yeah,
that
but the cause hasn't got to be God.
Well, remember I gave an argument for thinking that this cause is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, enormously powerful, and personal.
I think it's a computer.
Well, that wouldn't, computers are designed by people.
No, this is a self-designing computer.
Timeless.
Timeless.
Well, that's a contradiction in terms.
Why is it timeless? What's contradictory about it?
A computer has to function, it takes time.
Oh no, this is a special computer.
Yeah, but it has to be logically coherent.
Oh, it's logically coherent?
Yes, you have to be logically coherent.
Oh no, this computer is amazing.
No, besides, it would have to be, as I said, a personal being.
No.
A computer is a physical
Not this computer.
object.
Oh,
well, then,
no.
Okay, see, what you're doing is what you're calling a computer is really God. A non-physical, It's just another word if you rob it of all the attributes that make it a computer.
Surely Gates is God.
I'm saying that I don't know what caused it. And he claims he does know what caused it.
But he's saying more than that. He's saying you've got to prove.
No, I don't have to prove. I have to admit ignorance.
Well, if you admit ignorance and he admits knowledge, as it were.
He hasn't got knowledge.
Well, but he believes he has knowledge. So if
that's the whole nature of belief.
If we have two people, one of whom says, I don't know, God almighty, I hate all these absurd examples, but I go to two doctors, right? One of them, and I've got a pain in my wherever it is, and the first doctor says, I've no idea what's causing it, clear off, and the other one says, actually, it's because you've got a pimple in your thingy. Well, you know, and moreover, because this is what his God does, and moreover, I can cure it, I'll go for the second doctor.
No, but it's not saying a pimple in your thingy. He's saying there's a really special, unimaginable, supernatural thing in your thingy. Well, that's a problem.
You're unwilling to accept the idea of anything that exists beyond nature.
Yes.
Well, that is begging the question in favor of atheism. That just is presupposing that atheism is true. And that's what the debate's about.
Well, you're presupposing that God is true.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm giving arguments for God's existence. And what I'm looking for is arguments for atheism. And this isn't, lots of atheists give arguments for their view. You know, the problem of evil and suffering in the world.
Oh, no, that's a terrible argument.
Well, that's what I notice that's what Richard Dawkins says, too. Dawkins doesn't use that argument. But that is J.L. Mackie of Oxford, he used that argument.
Oh, must be a philosopher.
Well, it may, Lewis, be a terrible argument, but it's a pretty powerful argument when you're arguing against a Christian God who's supposed to be all-merciful, isn't it?
You know, what? There's
evil and suffering.
Mm.
So you mean we must blame God for all the suffering in the world, too?
I don't think that. I'm saying that atheists...
So who, if not God?
Offer arguments for atheism, and this would be an example. The atheist can't get off the hook here. He's making a knowledge claim.
But
God does not exist.
Oh, right.
See, that's a knowledge claim. It's the agnostic who makes no knowledge claim.
I don't say God does not exist. I say there's no evidence for God.
All right. Well, then that's mere agnosticism.
No.
Yeah.
No, we atheists say We do not believe that God exists.
Well, that's compatible with God existing, you see.
No.
That's mere agnosticism.
No, it's not.
Atheism says that God does not exist, which is a claim to know something and therefore requires justification.
I'm terribly, this atheist doesn't say this, he just says there's no evidence for God.
All right, well, how would you differentiate yourself then from an agnostic?
Agnostic says I'm clueless as to whether God exists or not, and I'm a coward to try and make up my mind.
Well, now that's pejorative.
Yes, it is pejorative, and I mean it to be pejorative.
All right, what about the non-cowardly agnostic, like Bertrand Russell, say, who says, I don't know whether God exists, I don't know whether God does not exist.
Well, that's agnostic, yes.
Well, that's what you are.
No.
Well,
good
okay,
Lord.
then give us, if you're not that, then you need to give us some warrant for the belief that there is no God.
No. I just said
Otherwise,
I know of no evidence or any reason to believe in God whatsoever. This is a supernatural being for which I know of no evidence, and he's done nothing that I know of in the last 2,000 years.
You use much of your book to deny the circularity of your argument. What you've been trying to do tonight, forgive me if I've got this wrong, Lewis, is prove that it is in fact entirely a circular argument.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Tell him why.
Tell him why it's a circular.
Yeah.
Why it's a circular argument?
Why is
because you want to believe, you need an explanation for things that you don't understand, like why the universe exists. And you're too frightened to admit that you don't know.
That's not the definition of what a circular argument is.
Well, it's circular-ish.
No, a circular argument is when your only reason for believing a premise is that you already accept the conclusion. That's what you're doing when you say there's nothing beyond nature, there is no supernatural. That's presupposing
no, but your argument
atheism.
is circular. That because there had to be a creator, therefore the creator had to be God.
No, I gave an argument.
No, I know, but I think that argument is totally false.
Well, then what you need to do,
we don't want to get involved in that
what you need to do,
again.
Professor Wolpert, is then to identify the false premise in the argument, because the logic is valid. The conclusion follows from the premises, so you have to show me which of the premises is false.
The premise is that there had to be a personal creator of the universe.
Okay, and then if you're going to argue that that's false, then you'll need to refute the two arguments that I gave for the personhood of the creator.
Oh, yes, well, there's no evidence for the personhood.
Well, I gave two.
Oh, well, the moral one is absurd, because there's plenty of morality. You don't believe that's not a strong one. What's the other one?
Oh, no, I think, well, that wasn't the argument for the personhood, though. The other arguments actually do give you a personal creator and designer. The arguments were that it must be a timeless and spaceless being, and therefore cannot be physical or material. And the only things that we know of that can fit that description are either minds or abstract objects, and abstract objects don't cause things. The number 7 can't cause anything. Therefore, the cause of the universe must be a mind.
I'm very suspicious of anything that's timeless and spaceless.
Well, you may be suspicious, but that's not really an argument or a refutation.
I'm not a good physicist on this.
Well, all right, and effectively what you're saying, as I understand it, and you'll tell me I'm wrong, I'm sure, effectively you're saying we do these moral things because over a long enough period we have concluded that they're in our interest to do them.
Absolutely.
Right. Why do people do those things that are not in their selfish interest but are clearly decent and good? Why do they sacrifice themselves in the cause of something from which they will benefit nothing?
We're into the whole thing, you know, about people's behavior, how the brain works, about sociology, about mental illness. There are all sorts of complications.
Have you never looked at somebody, have you never met anybody, and it might be a Mandela figure,
yes,
or it might be a Mother Teresa figure, or it might be an atheist, and said, actually, I don't know this person terribly well, don't know him at all, don't know anything about his medical background, whatever, but he's a good guy, good person, or
no, I think
good person.
No, I don't have to go to those great people. I can go to my partner and my friends and say they're good people.
Absolutely you can, and you can say they're good people. Why are they good people?
Because they help me a great deal and I like them.
Won't quite do in the case of Mandela.
Sure. Is that the basis of your moral system, because they help you?
And help other people too.
Okay.
So it's their behavior. There is nothing that you don't then go the extra step and say, why are they doing that? Well, even though it may not be in their best interest to do it.
Let's be clear that we don't really understand how people behave or why they behave.
He's offering you an explanation.
What, by a God? Oh, come on. What about all...
Don't shout at me, it was his argument.
sorry, I won't shout again. I can behave badly at times. I'm sorry.
Not at all, not at all.
No, to keep behaving badly.
But there are lots of people who are criminals who do all sorts of terrible things, and we don't fully understand why they do all those things. And some, people have breakdowns, they do all sorts of strange things, sure.
Could I clarify something about the argument? Because I think this is apt to lead to misunderstanding. My argument is not that belief in God is necessary in order to do good or live a moral life or be a decent chap. The argument has nothing to do about belief in God. The argument is that without God, there isn't any absolute standard of right and wrong, and therefore what we call moral values are just the spin-offs of sociobiological evolution. Altruism, like you mentioned, self-sacrificial behavior, a mother rushing into a burning building.
No, specifically not a mother to save a child, because there's a perfectly good reason for a mother saving the child.
Well, but if you say that, see, then again, you're still misunderstanding my argument. What I was going to say is that on the sociobiological point of view, that kind of altruistic behavior is just the selfish gene wanting to perpetuate itself, and it's the same kind of behavior you see in a troop of baboons, where you see what looks like altruistic behavior, or even in an ant heap, where fighter ants will sacrifice themselves for the good of the heap. My point is that on the atheistic view, that's all moral values are.
Is that right? Let's clear that
up. And I would like to ask...
Is there any difference, Lerner? You come back in 1 second, but let me just ask Lewis whether there is any difference between the altruistic behavior of a human being, somebody who may sacrifice him or herself for a cause which will bring them no particular benefit, and a baboon in a troop.
Well, there are occasions where there are groups of animals where there's someone who will scream when danger comes, and therefore the thing. So these can be biologically determined, but also there's the whole complex of the nature of the sociology of the society and how different societies behave, and that's got nothing to do with God. That's complex sociology and biology.
Oh, so
and who imposed the complex biology? Where did that come from?
Well, evolution.
Right.
Yeah, we're back to the old...
No, see, that's my argument. That is all that moral values are on atheism, and that therefore, as I say, rape, child abuse, these may be socially inconvenient, or taboo.
As an atheist, I'm not a rapist.
You're misunderstanding my argument. Of course you're not.
Thank
you. You're misunderstanding the argument. I'm not arguing that to be a good person, you have to believe in God. What I'm arguing is that without God, there is no absolute moral values, no absolute moral duties. We are like advanced primates, and what we call moral values are just these ingrained sociobiological patterns.
Yes, that's exactly what they are.
Okay, so that is your view. I was not sure of that. Well, then you see, when you make these moral judgments yourself, you're acting inconsistently with your own worldview. When you make moral judgments like everyone has the right to believe whatever he wants so long as it doesn't interfere with others. Where's this notion of rights suddenly come from? That's just
history and sociology.
Right, just sociologically ingrained behavior. So the pedophile or the rapist or the psychopath or the person who wants to be a religiously intolerant persecutor is just acting out of fashion. He's like the person who belches at a meal.
Hitler wasn't acting out of fashion. He acted in his particular way, which other people objected to.
Right, but there wasn't anything morally wrong with what he did, right, on your view?
Of course there was.
It was just contrary to the patterns of sociobiological behavior that have been ingrained into the human species, not to kill each other off. Why was what he did objectively wrong?
Because it killed many people and made people extremely unhappy.
All right, but now that goes on all the time in the animal kingdom, right?
No.
Killing other animals.
No, that does not.
Well, when a lion kills a zebra...
Oh, when a lion kills a zebra...
Kills it to eat, doesn't it?
What about when you kill your turkey? Be careful with turkeys at the moment.
Yes. Well, fine, use that example. On atheism, these are all morally neutral acts because there isn't any standard of right and wrong.
Sure, there isn't.
Okay, so then you agree with me that what Hitler did, there wasn't anything.
You've lost me a bit here, I confess, because you do seem to be saying that if you're an atheist, you're an immoral person.
No. Listen to the argument again. Yeah, if God does not exist, then objective moral values do not exist. Lewis agrees with that. Moral values on this.
No, he doesn't. Of course he doesn't.
Yes, he does. He just said
There are
merely
no external moral values, yes.
There are no external moral... Well, all right, define what you mean by an external moral value.
Coming from outer space and God.
Precisely, exactly. So, but what you do believe is that within us...
There is a moral value.
There is clearly a moral
Absolutely,
framework.
yes.
That's, I mean, I think you do misrepresent him a bit there.
Well, I think not, because if you were to rerun the film of evolution, and quite different creatures might have evolved having quite a different set of moral values.
I doubt it.
Right. And if that were the case, there would be no way that one of them could say, our values are right and your values are wrong. Or even among cultures. How can you say that National Socialist Germany was wrong and that the liberal democracies are right? It's right according to our point of view,
Sure.
but according to them, it's right according to their point of view. Everything becomes relative.
Lewis...
Because we identify with them.
With animals.
Yes. We are an animal after all.
And that's it.
I mean, the idea that God created us quite separately from all other animals is absurd. You know how animal we are alike. I'm a dog at heart.
Yeah. Yeah, and animals are not moral agents.
Well,
When a lion kills a zebra, it kills it, but it doesn't murder it. When a hawk steals a fish from the talons of another hawk, it takes the fish, but it doesn't steal the fish. None of these have any moral dimension to them, and it's the same with human behavior on this atheistic view. We're just relatively advanced primates, and there really isn't any objective right or wrong. It's just evolution.
good, yes.
Yeah, and I submit that's morally abhorrent.
Why is that? Now that's interesting. Why morally abhorrent?
Because torturing a child for fun is wrong.
But he's not saying it isn't wrong.
Yes, he is. All he's saying is that it goes against the patterns that have been ingrained into Homo sapiens, into this herd morality by evolution. But there isn't any objectivity to that. Animals kill their young all the time. Infanticide goes on all the time in the animal kingdom, and we're just animals.
Terribly sorry, infanticide does not go on all the time.
Well, I beg to differ. I mean, many animals will kill their own young.
What for?
I leave that to a biologist to explain.
I'm sorry, most animals do not kill their own young. They might kill somebody else's young. No, it's simply not true.
Well, they sometimes
they kill each other.
When did you last see a dog kill a puppy?
I haven't seen that, but I have seen mice do this with, pet mice do this kind of thing. It was very awful.
Maybe you should have... I was going to say maybe you should have fed them, but that's...
Yeah.